Steve Little is here as well. He's going to be running the slides for me. And so when you see slides magically moving, that's Steve that's doing it. So this is a partner showcase, which means that I, as a vendor of a BI solution, get to stand up and talk all day long about my product. Right? And I always sort of admire the people that come to vendor showcases because you generally get a demo crammed down your throat for an hour. But I'm going to break the mold a little bit today. I'm not going to do that. What I wanted to do instead was talk about some things that were maybe more relevant. I'm going to talk about, actually let's hit the slide, Steve, and we'll look at the agenda. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what business intelligence is, both from a functional standpoint and a technical standpoint. And I always do that because I think that even at this late stage in the game with business intelligence, there's still some confusion about what it is. So we're just going to get level set on that. And then we're going to talk about how some people have used it successfully. So think case study, right, to kind of highlight those points and lead us in to some of the best practices for implementing BI, because implementation is really kind of one of the most critical points, right? We've got some users in here, some JET users in here who I was just talking to who are in that phase right now, and they've highlighted some of those critical points, so we'll drill down into that. Then we're going to talk about the users. Users are super important. I'm a big believer in that business intelligence is more about people and process than it is about technology, right? A vendor's not supposed to say that, but again, I'm saying it, right? So we'll talk about how to think about your users. And then, yes, I'm going to do a little product demonstration to tie it all together. So without further ado, Steve. So BI, right? Lots of confusion about what it is. What I like to say is at its most general level, general definition is it is the technology and software that helps you to make sense of your data. Okay? Pretty easy to swallow from a definition, right? But if that's true, you know, couldn't that mean any type of report, maybe the native reporting that's coming out of your ERP system, or couldn't it be an Excel data dump into Excel? Or couldn't it be standard financial reports, income statements, and balance sheets, and that sort of stuff? So hold that last thought for a second, the standard reports, because I'm going to touch on that for a second. But right now, let's sort of level set, at least for this conversation, on what we mean by BI. And if we flip the slide, Steve, we'll see that you've got these three boxes, right? And you can think of the box on your left as your transactional database. So that's your ERP system, right? We're in the NAV world, so this is NAV. You got a ton of data in there, right? In NAV, you have well over 1,000 tables. And you've got tens of thousands of fields, and it's a complicated data set because you've got connections between the tables and fields. Unless you really understand that and know where the data is and know how one piece connects to the other, it's hard to get any information out of that big, massive data. So that's where BI comes in. So if we go to the next two slides, and what we do is we take data out of the transactional database, and we put it into a totally separate and distinct reporting environment. So that's called the data warehouse. And so once you get into these two boxes on your right, you're no longer connected, with some caveats, you're no longer connected to the ERP system. You're in a totally new environment. And now we've taken data out, but we didn't take all the data out. We just took what is most relevant to the users. So for some NAV users, it's 10 tables and 100 fields. For other NAV users, it's 100 tables and maybe 1,000 fields. But the point is that it's a data set that is now more relevant to you and also more streamlined and cleaned up and configured for faster, quicker, easier access to that data. We go a step further then, and we take that data from the data warehouse and we organize it into subject matter. These are commonly called cubes. When you hear that term, that's what a cube is. It's data that is organized into subject matter. So anything that's related to sales goes into a sales cube. Doesn't really matter where it originally resided in the database or even in the data warehouse. It's just anything that you want to call sales, you put into the sales cube. And the same thing with finance, and the same thing with AR and purchasing, and whatever kind of cube you want to build. If it's called the XYZ cube, right? Because you're an XYZ company, you can build the XYZ cube, right? So, see where we are in my notes. So if we go to the next slide, right? This is where there's another set of confusion happens. Is how do I use it, right? So I always ask the questions, right? So can you name quickly your top 10 customers? Right? Or can you tell me what your most profitable products and services are and sort of what some of the key metrics on those are? Do you know what the average time between a client's inquiry and when they get an answer is, right? And so if it's easy access to that kind of data, that is the promise of BI, right? And so functionally speaking, what it is at the top is really it's a decision-making tool. And so it's designed to let you lay out the critical parts of your business. So I call that analytics, trends, summaries, and metrics, right? and to analyze them. A good example is, let's say I want to see last year's sales, so give me a sales report. Okay, I see that. Why do I have that big spike in Q2? Let me drill down into Q2. Okay, I got that, right? I can now see what items comprise that spike. Well, let me see which salespeople sold those items. Okay, I got that. Let me see what their gross profit numbers were, and so on. And so what that allows you to do is ask questions of your data, because you're seeing in that example that you have these items that are selling really well, but you also have this set of items that's not selling very well, and you jump out to the inventory cube and you check the inventory on those items, and sure enough, you've got a big, huge warehouse full of them. So now you know what to do, right? You're able to make a decision. Call the marketing department, say, hey, look, we have these items, they're not selling well, they're costing us money sitting in inventory. Let's have a sale, let's run a campaign, let's fire sale them out of there, and we can focus on what makes us more money, right? So that's what the BI is designed to do. To turn the data, you see my little thing there, I love this saying, turn the data that you have into information that can be used for intelligence to run your business. Okay, and quickly, because I read this interesting thing about decisions, right? It's a decision-making tool. So a Dun & Bradstreet report, it came out actually last week, and it said that the average worker makes 612 decisions a day. Okay, so some of those decisions, granted, are, am I going to delete that email, or am I going to save it, or am I going to check Facebook or go to lunch? But yeah, a good portion of those decisions are around the business, using the data that is in your business to make the decisions, right? So if you had a normal company, 250 workers, that's 153,000 decisions a day. 300 work days, that's 45.9 million decisions a year, right? So the question is that I like to ask is, what if we could make that easier, right? What if we could become have the data at our fingertips to make those decisions faster and, more importantly, better? What if we could be that data-driven company, right? And I think if you're in the room, that's kind of what you're thinking. Is BI has this promise, and what is it, and how would I use it? And that's kind of what we're talking about. All right, Steve, we can flip the slide. So one question, and it's a good one, I get asked about this point every time I start talking about this, is, okay, so I kind of understand what BI is, but reporting, what is reporting and how does it relate to BI? And if there's a difference between the two things, where does reporting stop and BI start, right? It's a good question. It's a good question because it's hard to answer, because there's sort of a blurry line, right? And it's a different, that line is in a different place for everybody. So I can give you some characteristics of what a report is. So a report is typically a standard document, a static document like this, that nothing really moves very much. And you generally want the numbers in the same place, and you generally want to have the same conversation about that set of numbers at the same time with the same people in the same point in your business cycle, every month or every week or like that, right? And the reason for this is because these are questions that you already know to ask, and you know when to ask them. So for instance, what was our sales last month? Well, I don't know, let's look at the report, right? Or what was our profit last month? Well, I don't know. Let's look at the report. Inventory is important to us. We know that's an important question. What were our inventory levels? Let's go, I don't know the answer, let's go look at them, right? BI is different though, because BI is about actually digging into the data and then finding new questions to ask. So it's about the questions that you don't know yet, right? And more on this later, because we're going to look at a model that kind of describes how to sort of get there. But I'll leave you with this, something else that I read. So reporting is supposed to tell you what happened, and business intelligence tells you why that happened. All right, see if we go to the next slide. So now that we're level set, right, these are just some of the complaints that I hear about BI users, right? They're all generally about access to your data, and they generally go, like, they put in a business intelligence system and they combine their boarding pass information with the sales from the retail store. And what they found out is that outbound travelers going to Asia bought 3 things: cigarettes, liquor, and expensive jewelry, right? And so that let them do a couple of things. One is it smoothed out those spikes and raised their revenue and profitability, because now they can plan inventory-wise for those Asian flights, and they can have stuff on the shelf to sell. The other is that it let them be more strategic about the way they marketed, so they can think about how those outbound Asian travelers are very valuable to us. How do we advertise so that we attract more of them to the airport? So this next one, if we change the slide, is near and dear to all of our hearts because it's about coffee in the Pacific Northwest. So a small coffee producer, actually locally, they did roasting and distribution, and they had 3 systems. They had NAV for inventory and invoicing, they had CRM for orders, and then they had Oracle for production. And so coffee is perishable, and so it's critical to combine to plan purchasing and production around inventory and orders. And so they did a BI, put in a BI system, consolidated their 3 databases, and they're able to do just that. It helps with a couple of things with them, namely profitability and sales, because now they can align their tactics and their discounting strategies with the expiration dates on their beans. And so it's not like it used to be with them, where somebody would notice that a batch of beans or a batch of ground coffee was about to expire and they have to fire sale it and lose money on it, right? So a direct profitability effect there. Okay, so we go to the next slide, Steve. So what do these 2 little case studies have in common, right? So if we drill down into the details, you would see that it's really about them doing a successful job of planning and preparing and communicating before they ever put a BI system in, right? So, a problem was identified, consensus was gained on some of the drivers behind that problem, and then plans were put in place to build the solution. So I would say if there's a common theme in terms of the success behind a BI project, it's really about communication and planning, right? It's generally around understanding your business and then understanding your data, right? So having a shared understanding about what business we're in, what the key drivers are behind that business. And that shared understanding part sounds pretty obvious, right? But you'd be surprised, we've done hundreds of BI implementations, and when we go and we start asking these questions, you'd be amazed at the range of answers that we get in them. So it's about communication, it's about planning, it's about getting this shared understanding. But it's not something that should necessarily take a long time, and you don't want to overcomplicate it, right? You just want to kind of know, are we capturing the right data points? Are we combining the right data sources? Are we thinking about the right metrics? And, I think at the bottom of all this is, do we know, again, do we have a shared understanding of what we're looking to get out of a business intelligence system, right? Those are the questions you want to start to answer first, and that's why I say, before you have a business intelligence system, you need to have an intelligent business, right? That's what I mean by intelligence. So another way we did it in our organization, we assigned a project lead to she walked around, asked all the department heads what they wanted in a BI system, just took notes of that, and then we went to the implementation team and sort of built that. And I know what I needed. She came to me and I said I needed to combine my sales operations metrics with financial information, right? Which is a fancy way of saying I needed to see how many demos my sales team was doing and how that translated into revenue over time, right? Pulled those 2 things together. That was actually a couple different databases that we needed for that. And all of a sudden, all these great metrics pop up. So now I know days in stage, right? I know how many touch points it takes to a client before we actually get a sale. I can even do forecasting, so I know that if the sales team does X amount of demos on one date, then I can expect X amount of revenue on another date. And it always works out exactly that way. It's exactly the way. Yeah, it's always very precise science. But it's as simple as that. Simple as asking questions. For us, it took about a week to get those requirements down. And I'm a big believer in keeping things simple. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to go through some best practices. And on best practices, I've got a list of about 20 of them, right? But I'm going to go through 3 that kind of get to the general theme. And so determining the information that's necessary, right? Again, this is about understanding and communication. And there's a concept out there of general purpose business intelligence. So just lay it out in front of me, lay all the data out there, and I'll figure out what it is once I see it, right? Now, that can work, and we've seen that work. In fact, we have an implementation methodology that actually takes that into account and sort of makes it better. But I would say that if you're looking for a quick win and a successful start to your BI project, have a business driver in mind, right? So find a starting point, identify a project that has a specific problem that better access to data is going to help you with. So, accelerating a slow process, eliminating a bottleneck, highlighting new revenue sources. For me, it was combining the sales and operational data with finance, right? And what I always say is, again, ask those questions of yourself before you start, and implement in such a way that you get a quick win, right? And then show the example to the users all across the organization of how using data and metrics can drive better performance, right? I always say, show that example, get a success story out there, and then go brag about it and tell everybody, because the more people see that success, they're going to want to participate in it, and then it starts to spread out through the organization. All right, our next practice is on the next slide. So understanding the data, and this is really about cube building, right? So how do we want our data organized? And what do we need to combine? You remember that specific purpose, right? So that is going to help you answer those questions. Where is our data? How do we need to, what do we need to combine? Where do we need to combine it? You know, think about the problems you're trying to solve. And one of the ways I kind of use to highlight this is think about the meetings that are taking place, right? So think about who is sitting across from whom, and think about the questions that are being asked, right? And that can kind of go a long way to getting a good start. And once you have that good start, I always caution people that you expect it to change, because the good questions that you start asking yourself all of a sudden lead to more analysis, which drives a different set of questions. And so however you configure your BI system in the beginning, whether you use somebody's out-of-the-box cubes or whether you have done this analysis and you've gone and you've built your own specific data set, that's going to change, and it should change. Yeah, that's, you know, you put BI in place to make your business better, and so it's going to change. And I know in my situation where my boss asked me a totally different set of questions than he did 2 years ago before we installed a BI system. And he asked me those questions for one reason, because he knows now I'm finally going to have the answer, right? But also because my answers then let him think about the problem in a different way, then drives new questions, right? Which I have to go get the answers to. So product, so you know, a business driver behind an implementation can go a long way to ensuring a success. Do we have somebody back there who could bring me a glass of water? I'm joking. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I should have thought, you thought he would have thought about that earlier. Okay, so we're on number 3 here, and this is kind of the final one before we switch gears. So every true business intelligence system is going to have a data management tool, right? And so we call that an ETL tool. So there's an acronym for you. Thank you, Gina. All right. An ETL tool, right? So ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. And so we're extracting the data out of the core database. We're transforming it to meet our needs, so organizing it and streamlining it, and then we're loading it into the BI system, right? So really notice this is the first time that I've talked about technology, right? Because I'm a believer, and it's more about process than it is about technology. But this is really one very important piece, the ETL tool, the data management tool. This is a place where BI projects fall down, and this is where you hear those nightmare stories of the BI implementation that took 6 months and cost $100,000, and at the end of the day, you still don't have a BI system, right? And I'm sort of telling you this because this is kind of one of the great things about our product is this is what we focused on. This is what when we came to market, this is the gap that we decided to fill. Is we wanted to make this part of the process as easy as humanly possible. It's not flashy and it's not cool, right? It's kind of geeky and propeller head behind the scenes sort of stuff. But I always say, as you go through the expo today and you evaluate options on BI, ask the folks about this part of their tool, right? This is a super important part. I'm going to spend a little more time on it later. We're going to show it in the demo. But simply put, it should be something that you can use in-house. It should be something that your power users can do without having to run to the partner every time you want to make a change in that data set or every time you want to write something new, right? So just kind of keep that thought in mind. We're going to take a look at it later. Okay, so those are the general best practices, and now we're going to look at this model that I built. I went a little crazy with PowerPoint here. It's not as complicated as it looks like. You can think of this as your BI framework that kind of pulls those best practices in, or your business intelligence ecosystem. And really, for all the complications there, it's really two things. It's a top-down view of the business intelligence world, and it's a bottom-up view. So top-down means, again, those questions that you already know to ask, right? So what you do is that you have gathered the requirements for those questions. You bake those questions into the data model that you build in your data warehouse. And then you bake the answers to those questions in the reports that you distribute to the casual users. And so this is really about reporting and monitoring and then delivering reports on a scheduled basis. So bottom up is, as we've talked about, analysis inside of the data set. And it's about the questions that you don't know yet, or at least the questions that you don't know the answers to yet, and you need to explore the data using ad hoc queries. And so each of these environments are related. And you see the little thing in the middle. That is kind of a virtuous cycle. Is you want the top down part to be related to the bottom part in this way. So you have these casual users who are looking at these reports, these pre-planned reports, And that makes them ask questions, which then go down into the bottom layer where analysis can be done to answer those questions. The analysts at the bottom find something that's interesting to people. They present it, right? People think that's great. I want to look at that on a regular basis, and all of a sudden that becomes a report. Right? That report then gets disseminated, to a wider audience in the organization. They start asking more questions about it, driving more questions that the analysis at the bottom layer does. And it's this cycle of that keeps repeating itself of we're learning more and more about our company by asking better and better questions because we're enabled by a decision-making tool that allows us to do that, right? So you want a cycle like that. It's kind of unfortunate. We don't see it every time, though. We kind of say one of the things to guard against is that we see companies that sort of focus on one or the other, or they tend to vacillate between the two. The way it works is you've got power users at the top who are asking more questions, but they get a little frustrated at the slow pace of development, and so they learn how to use the tool to do the detailed level analysis, right? And that works for a little bit, but then they try to do something too complicated. They don't really understand how to do it, and it breaks or falls apart. Or they try to scale that to other users, and that sort of tends to fall apart. And it's kind of unfortunate because you really do want both, right? You need to create a synergistic environment in your organization where both of these can be successful. And so I'm going to get technical here for a second again. So what allows you to do that is a BI tool that gives you access to the semantic layer of your ERP, right? And so semantic layer, that's just a fancy term for being able to define the raw data from a business person's perspective, right? And so you combine that with an ETL tool that is easy to use. Maybe it's in a drag and drop environment. Again, your power users should be able to use that. And then you have what some would call self-service BI, right? So there's another sort of buzzword for you, self-service BI. There's confusion around that, and people get confused about who exactly is doing the self-servicing. And if you look at this model, you see that everybody should be able to do the self-servicing. It should be done at the top because you have casual users who have as much report interactivity as they want and have the ability to ask the analysts at the bottom or the data scientists at the bottom to improve the data model so they can get better answers, right? And it's the people at the bottom, the data analysts, who are able to self-service that data model and to be able to build the data structures that will answer the questions that the information consumers at the top are asking. Right, so self-service BI is sort of wrapped up in this virtuous cycle, and it's kind of hard. I would say it's kind of hard to have a really successful BI implementation unless this sort of environment is in place. Okay, so again, that's what's great about our product, and we're going to look at it in a minute. It's called Jet Enterprise, and we're going to take a look at that back end, and I'm going to show you kind of how easy it is to build that data set. But let's spend 5 minutes on the users of the system before we do that, because I've talked about them, I haven't really explained them too much. So, and I'm sort of talking about the users. I'm just trying to put some stuff in this presentation that's relevant to everybody in the room, because I know that you're going to be exposed to. You go to the expo, you're going to see a lot of vendors, right? And this will hopefully give you some things to focus on as you're evaluating your options out there, right? And so we'll talk about the users, and I'll explain a little bit more why it's important. So you got two types of users, right? So we hit the button, Steve. You've got the information consumer and the information producer, right? So if we hit the button again, Steve, got these useless animations in my report. One more time, just to keep Steve busy there. So what the consumers care about is they want greater and greater degrees of report interactivity. So that means that they want to be able to drill down or sort across or add some new dimensionality to a report. And that's because the more interactivity you get, generally the better analysis that you can do. The report producer, these are the people that tend to produce the data model and then produce the major dashboards, the major reports that get disseminated. They need different types of interactivity, and most importantly, that's around building the actual data structure that allows them to do that, right? So if we go to the slide, we'll drill down into each of these a little bit. So there's a hierarchy of uses, right? And so not every consumer in this case is going to go down all the way to the bottom of this hierarchy. A good BI system should allow them to sort of settle where they're most comfortable. And these are, by the way, roles. They're not necessarily individuals. So it's kind of fun to see if we can identify ourselves in this hierarchy. So the consumers that do nothing but view, these are the folks that just sort of look at a report, pick the 2 or 3 numbers that they need out of it, and then they go on their way. Right? And I would sort of argue that if you have population of only viewers, then you probably don't need a business intelligence solution. You probably need one of our other products, right? But it's very rare that you really have a population made up entirely of viewers. So the next set is those folks that are going to navigate, and these are the ones that are really appreciating the interactivity of the report. So they're clicking on the dashboards, right? They're picking some dimensions that might be in that data model and adding it to a pre-built report. They're drilling down and across, right? You have folks that are going to modify any report that you give them. So they're going to add a column, right? Or they're going to add a sum. Or they're going to toggle and sort and do that stuff. The report will likely be unrecognizable from what was originally produced. Then you have those folks that are going to explore, right? And so they are going to take all the dimensions that you've given them access to and put them in the report and drill down and across. And again, that report is going to be unrecognizable. Then you have the folks that are going to model. So they're going to take that report that has been produced and they're going to do some sort of statistical analysis on it, or they're going to do some sort of forecasting on it, right? So then we go to the producers, right? Again, a different set of functionality. You can kind of go through this hierarchy and assume more and more IT skills as you get lower in it. And so you have the folks that are going to personalize the interface. And so they're going to actually change the look and feel of a dashboard, or look and feel of even the delivery mechanism that helps with that dashboard. Then you have the folks that are going to assemble, right? So they're going to build a new report from different parts of the data, maybe parts of the data that haven't been explored so thoroughly before, usually on the request of a consumer. You have the crafters, right? They're going to actually write underlying queries. So, purchasing department needs a new inventory days and stage calculation, right? So a crafter is going to do something like that. And then the sourcers, these are the folks that are going to actually add new data sources. So the sales team says, well, we're keeping our sales data in an Excel table, right? Our commission data in an Excel table. Can you pull that in? Or we just bought a new payroll system. Can you add that data in? And then the developers, the folks that are going to write code or script to actually alter the BI application as a whole. Okay, so why does this matter, right? So, if you want you can just click through the slides there. I've got a bunch of, again, useless animation you probably can't read. So I kind of put that stuff in about your users on purpose, because if you want your project to be a success, you're really going to understand, you need to understand how your people are going to use it, right? And what the needs are out there in your organization. And so as you go out into the world and you look at the options that you have in front of you from BI vendors, you want to kind of have this stuff top of mind. So I know that I've got, a lot of viewers or a lot of modifiers. So I'm going to make sure that when I see a demo of that product, I'm going to ask them to show me the stuff that I know that I'm going to need, right? And just, think about, the executives are going to have different needs than analysts, operational managers, different needs than accounting clerks, right? And so if you think about the beginning of the presentation, it's all sort of coming through full circle. So you want to just understand not only your data, not only your business, but also your users, and assemble that into a package so that you can go and talk to folks like our sales team. And I always say, when you're in a demo, ask them specific questions. You say, so I have these kinds of users. Are they going to be able to do these types of things? Or I know that my IT team internally, or my power users internally, are strong at the following things. Can you show me how they would use the tool? Right? You'll get real specific in a BI demo. Speaking of which, that's what we're going to do now. How are we doing on time? Pretty good. We're going to shift gears, and we're actually going to take a look at Jet Enterprise. Is that blurry to everybody in the audience? No? Okay.
Time for new prescription, isn't it?
I've been saying that for 3 days. It must be something about the Seattle air that makes me not be able to see very well. Okay, so this is a dashboard that we built against the sales cubes as one possible result of Jet Enterprise. And I'll point out at the beginning a couple of things. So when I say Jet Enterprise, there's actually a couple different tools baked into one. So this is a tool that allows you to go and build those static reports that I talked about against the transactional database. It also allows you to go and build analytics, so the trends, summaries, and metrics, against the data warehouse and the cubes. So you can report against 3 different environments, right? You can build any report that you want. One of the reasons for that is because we use Excel as a front end. And you can see here that as you get licensed with Jet, you all of a sudden have a Jet tab up there in the ribbon. And inside of that ribbon, you have all these different ways to produce a report, which we're going to get to earlier. But let me show off the dashboard a little bit. So Steve starts clicking on things. You can see that the data starts to change, right? And so this is that report interactivity that most of your information consumers are going to want. Being able to pick off the data that you want, being able to do analysis, drill down and drill across. What's great about it is that it's super fast. Remember, we're not going against the transactional database anymore, so you're not churning through the thousands of tables. You're actually going against a streamlined cube, so the data's happening fast, asking a bunch of questions about it, right? Let's show you how to build a report from scratch. So we're going to open up a new worksheet. And we're in the Jet ribbon here, and so you see in the Jet ribbon there's all these different tools that you can use to build a report. I'm not going to show all of them, right, but we'll do a couple of them to show you what we got. And let's do a pivot table, Steve. I think a pivot table is probably the easiest way to produce a report. So we're going to click on pivot table. You can see that this is a demo database. I've got a lot of different stuff in there. So we'll go to our nav cubes, and we'll pick the sales cube, Steve, and we'll do just a simple sales report to start off with. So you see this list of values that you have here. So this list is important for a couple of different reasons. One is that this is what comes out of the box for us. And before we came to market with this product, we did a big survey of our customers, and we have about 5,000 customers around the world, so it was a good-sized survey. We asked them how they typically wanted to see their data organized, and so this is reflected here in this data structure. Okay, that's great. But you can also change this data structure pretty much at will. So anything that you want to put in there, you can put in there. This actually is our standard set of cubes. So we're going to build a report. And so Steve, give me a sales number. So he's going to click on sales. And then give me all those sales over time. And then we're going to click on a time dimension as we go down. And then give me those sales across my item categories. And we're going to go and we'll search for item categories. And there we go. And so what pops out is this deceptively simple looking report, right? So this is actually more complicated than it looks, because what we're doing there is we're aggregating information from about 10 different tables in nav plus a time dimension, right? But I didn't have to know that. Remember that chart about with all the information in the ERP with all the complicated connections, right? I don't have to know that anymore when I'm in this world, because I don't need to know how to write a union or a join, or I don't need to know the 10 different tables involved. All I need to know is what it is that I'm looking for, and it's just going to appear here on the screen. And so there's lots of detail in this report. Steve can drill down into the hierarchy. You can go as many layers deep as you might have in your raw data. And if we want to see even more detail, then we can double-click on any one of those numbers, and we'll get this, which is a detailed transaction that makes up that top-line sales number. And I don't think our screen resolution is perfect there, Steve, but hopefully we're getting the point. I'll work with it. Okay, so if we close all that up, right, we can also change the data view, because you remember thinking about this is analysis that we're doing right here. Analysis is really designed not necessarily to answer the questions that you already know about, but to find new questions. And so I look at this and I say, well, okay, I see the items that I sold. Who did I sell them to, right? So I can go in and I can quickly find my customers, and I can drag my customers out, and this will tell me where all these products went. And what happens now is we have a huge list of customers, and we hope everybody's customer list is that big. But easy to filter down, because remember, we're just using Excel. Super simple. Steve just right-clicked. He hit let's show me the top 10. And we'll say, okay, so now we have a more manageable list. So all the top 10 customers that have bought my items. Let's say I want to change that data view again. It's very easy. I can just go into the field list, and I can drag items underneath customer. Right? And everything changes. So I have a whole new different set of analysis just by clicking around. And kind of what I'm trying to show here is the ease of getting access to your data, right? So you're not having to worry about the formatting. You're not having to worry about, okay, I didn't ask for that report from the IT department the right way. I got to go back to them and ask another report. You're just sort of asking questions and getting answers of your data. And so, Steve, let's get customers out of there. Let's show how we can do a slightly different piece of analysis with the same report. So if you give me a chart, which is very easy to do really at any point in the report building process, I always like a 3D pie chart, right? So, and then we can also filter this data down a bit. So Steve's doing a great job of getting the data to display on this screen. We should have thought of this. You think we would have thought of this before, yeah. All right, so let's filter the data down. So we can do that by using what's called a slicer. And we will filter, I think it's, yeah, there we go. All right. Oh, yeah, I think you want to be in the thingy, yeah. All right, so now we have slicers. So we can filter by company, right? So right now we're looking at a multi-company consolidation report. We can separate those companies out just by asking for it. We can filter by country. We can also filter by time. And we can filter by item category. All right, so this will give us something to work with. Quite a few slices that we're going to end up with here. And so, yeah, and it's normally, you can organize better than this. It won't look like this on your screen, right? But let's say we want to see something like, let's say we want to see the data for Belgium. So we can just click on Belgium, right? So that's our Belgian company. Or let's say we want to see how things look for the UK, right? We'll look at UK. And then let's look at North America, because that's kind of where we are right now. And then I don't care about 2007. I want to see 2011. I want to see last year instead of 5 years ago. And I want to see 4 or 5 item categories, not the whole thing, right? And so the point that I'm trying to make there, again, is it's easy access to your data. It's ability to go in, to query your data set, to ask questions of your data, to get answers right away. It's a very different world from having to go and run, the old world of having to kind of pull start the mainframe and run a report that's going to take forever as it churns through your transactional database, right? This is all about easy access to the data. So that was a report against the pre-built data set. Let's do one more example here. And I'll show you how we can build a report against any number of other data sets. So we're in the Jet tab. I say we start off with the browser, Steve. And this is our browser, which allows us to kind of take a peek into multiple different places. So Steve can have us look at cubes, or you can have us look at the actual NAV database. And what you're seeing here is all the tables that exist in the database on the left-hand side of your screen. And then there's kind of some cool features there. You can set favorites. So if you just normally pick 10 or 15 tables, use 10 or 15 tables, you can select those and the favorites will show up. You can limit your data set. On the right-hand side of your screen are the fields, right? And if we click on one of those fields and we hit that drop-down arrow, what you'll see is an example of some of the data that are inside the field. So the browser is kind of cool because it lets you sort of go into the database and poke around and see examples of the data. If you look down here in the details button, you can, in the details section, you get to see even more data, more detail on the data there. So whether or not it's a flow field or how it's delimited. In this case, it's a decimal. Exactly what the name of the field is as well. So the browser is kind of cool. It's one of my favorite pieces of functionality that we have. So let's build a report, kind of a free format Excel report, and we're actually going to go to the cubes to do this. So let's go to the AX cubes. Yeah, just for fun, right? And let's build an inventory report, right? So we're going to see how fast we can do kind of a free format report here. So Steve is going to pick my items. I want to first take my items and drag them out of the browser and put them into the report. And then, so Steve, give me a value on those items, see what the items are worth. Yeah, closing value. And then a quantity. Quantity, we'll give it some context. All right, well done. So now we're going to do something tricky. And I'm going to show off the formatting capabilities. So I want to put each of my item groups on a different worksheet. So in order to do that, we're going to select sheets in the browser. And then we're going to pull out item groups. And put it into the worksheet. And then we're done with the browser, so we're going to close the browser. And I'll show another way to build a report. So we're going to do some formatting with the Jet function wizard, some filtering and formatting. And so this is the Jet function wizard. And Steve is just going to do some man behind the curtain kind of stuff here to get the formatting done. He's actually going to filter for item groups and then select that. And then we're going to do some further formatting. So let's add a chart to that, Steve. And remember, we're in Excel, so we can do whatever you would normally be able to do with Excel, right? So he's going to add a chart. He's going to format the headings. He might format the number or the dollar sign. And I typically give him about 15 seconds to do this because he'll go, forever. Like he'll. All right. So I think we're good. I think it's time to run that report. So what's going to happen now is we're going to hit the report button in the JET tab, and the JET function wizard and the browser are going to go off, and they're going to communicate with the database, and they're going to pull the exact data that we asked for with our wizard, and then format it in the exact way that we formatted it, right? And so sure enough, you see that we've got different tabs for each item group, and we have a chart that you can kind of see a corner of there, right? And the point that I'm trying to make, there you go, I'm trying to make is that that's a fairly involved report, right? You've got a chart, a graph, you've got it formatted, you've got the data that you wanted. And it only took Steve a few seconds to do, right? And that's kind of the promise of JET Enterprise is that you can hit all different data sources. You can format in any way you want. We try to make things as simple as possible. It's a 10-year-old product that we've kept developing over time, so it's chock full of ease of use and functionality that our users have wanted. And that's our marketing slogan, actually. Keep me honest on this. I always forget it. It's any report, any way, right now. I think it says it on my shirt. Any report, any way, right now. Right? So we actually have some reports teed up here. I can show you some of the other things that it can do. So there's an accounting report, right? I think we have a financial report in there as well.
Is this all based off the global dimensions, 1 and 2, though? Because what I always struggle with is kind of all 9 of our dimensions.
Right. So you can pull any amount of dimensionality into it that you want, right? So, and especially if you put your data into a data warehouse in cubes, right? Then all those dimensions get there right at your fingertips.
First started this off, we said reports and VR are different, right? But yet we're referring to this as a report. I'm just curious, is it reports with NVI and differentiate between the regular reports?
Yeah. So you remember how I said there's a blurry line,
Yeah.
right? and that's kind of where we are. So and this is maybe a hybrid. I think that's a good question. This is maybe a hybrid because this is an income statement that for some reason doesn't have any data in it. I don't know why, but it's an income statement. There we go. Okay. And so this is one of those reports that, prior life I was just a finance guy. I would look at this report and I would just kind of pick a couple numbers off it that I wanted, right? So that's great. So it can serve that purpose. But it can also serve the purpose of somebody. Every time I look up, it's different. There we go. It can also serve the purpose of letting us look through our dimensions, right? Filtering by year, filtering by company. So at that point, it does become a piece of analysis. Right, and so I'm doing my part, right, to blur that line there. But the point that I was trying to make earlier is that you can do both with JET reports. It gives you the ability to do both. It also gives you the ability to happily blur those lines. Okay, and that's kind of it for the demo part. I promised a light demo, and that was kind of a light demo. We've got 5 or 10 minutes left, and we're in the Q&A portion. Any more questions?
Something I wanted to bring up, the sales dashboard, the one that you guys started with, and this comes with a lot of end users and partners deal with this a lot too, is anytime that you're upgrading, migrating over to a new system, doing anything like that, you generally have 200, 300, 500 different reports that you need to convert over. A dashboard like this is, I think when I had them help make mine for us to use actually at JET, it combines about 25 different reports.
they don't have access to your data, is it like contained within the file, I guess is what I'm saying.
So it's not, right? It becomes a static report then, unless you're licensed for jet reports. However, that's a good segue into how we do our pricing, right? So, all this stuff, hopefully it came out that we're a real keep it simple kind of company. We try to do things as simple as possible. We also have a very simple pricing structure, so it's not going to break the bank to license everybody in your organization, right? And so I'm happy to talk about exactly how that works But to answer the question directly, yeah, you need to be licensed for jet reports before you can start clicking on those buttons and have anything happen.
They don't have to have a license to receive them.
But no, it's at the end of the day, it's an Excel file that they can look at.
And then, how does it work if you're in a hosted environment? And so, say I licensed it for my CFO, to be able to work with the data, but then how does it connect? So does the data get dumped in, can the data warehouse reside on locally, even if our nav is